a show that tackles the big issues affecting the BVI and the rest of the Caribbean. Searches for answers to today's big questions and gives viewers a unique perspective on developing stories. Follow the big story with me, Kathy Richards, only on JTV. This show is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, Cyril B. Ramney Tertola Pier Park, NV Salon Spa Nail and Barbershop, the Wellness Center, Medical and Behavioral Health Clinics, Ticely Cross Deliciously Smooth Cider, HOV Medical and Digicel, simply more speed, reliability and entertainment. Welcome to this edition of The Big Story. I'm Kathy Richards. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we want to have a conversation with someone who we know very well in this territory. She has been a pillar in so many instances. Mrs. Lorna G. Smith, and we have heard and have been hearing that, that Lorna is going to be trying to contest the general elections this year, but we want to find out for ourselves. So we're not going to go with what we hear on the streets. We want to hear it live and direct from you. Mrs. Smith, thank you so much for joining us here on The Big Story.
Thank you for having me, Kathy.
And on the go, we are going to get into that, a very big topic that we've been hearing around. General elections is due by May of this year, and the call has been out there for more persons of character, more persons who are versed in negotiating skills and being able to face the international challenges that we face as a territory should get onto the ballot and contest this general election and get into the management seat of this territory. Your name has been coming up as to, Lorna is going to run, Lorna is going to run, Lorna is going to run. Some say, nah, it's just a talk. Tell us what's the fact.
The fact is, Kathy, that I do plan to contest the elections as an at-large candidate. About 2 weeks ago, I was asked. In fact, I was told that the story was going to be printed. And I said then that I was seriously considering. And today I can tell you that I have made my decision that I will contest the elections, as I said, as an at-large candidate.
Okay. Why make this decision? Why have you decided to contest this year?
Kathy, I have always been passionate about the British Virgin Islands and its people. I believe that the British Virgin Islands deserve the best. We deserve the best. My mission as a professional has always been to make sure that the territory of the British Virgin Islands got the best. I'm running to fulfill that mission. Why at this time? Because there are so many things happening globally that impact us. There is the war in Ukraine. There is the change in globalization as we know it. And these things impact us. Impact us, for instance, in terms of the cost of living. You know, you go to a supermarket these days, you can't get more than 2 groceries bags for close to $200. These things are impacting the British Virgin Islands. And there is just so much that we need to do in the British Virgin Islands to really continue to be a global competitor.
And what qualifies you?
A lot.
Tell me.
I have worked for the British Virgin Islands all my life. As you said in the beginning, I'm skilled in negotiations. I have worked for chief ministers, beginning with the late H. Labadie Stout, the ultimate visionary, on a number of projects. For instance, he asked the governor to have me move from the Ministry of Natural Resources, where I was the permanent secretary, to his office, Chief Minister's, now we call it the Premier's office, because I shared his vision for the development of a college. And so I was asked to coordinate that project, and I did so successfully. I am passionate about education. I'm passionate about young people. I have proven, I'm not just passionate, I've proven that I can do what needs to be done in those areas. Education. I'm passionate. I talk about infrastructure. That's another big area that we need to look at. We need to look at climate change. I have been very, very active. In fact, climate change, I talk about it in terms of our experience of the hurricanes, especially Hurricane Irma. I was there when it happened. I myself lost my home, so I knew what it felt like. But I didn't sit and mourn. I made sure that in terms of both the restoration of homes for British Virgin Islanders, as well as our financial services, stayed afloat. So while our tourism was negatively impacted, and it took us a while to get back, because of my knowledge and experience in financial services, I was able to work with other people, including Robert Mathavius at the Financial Services Commission and the persons in the financial services industry, to make sure that our financial services stayed intact and continued to do work for us. Thank God we had a British Virgin Islander as the head of the Supreme Court, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. We were able to call her and work with her to be able to have a virtual system so that our courts continue to function for us. So there are all those things that I consider to qualify me to be a candidate in this upcoming election.
One of the things that, have been touted about a lot since the events of April, in fact, since the events of the Commission of Inquiry being called on this territory, one of the things that has been out there a lot is the need for persons who are strong in negotiating skills on an international frontier. Your name has been coming up from that get-go as a strong person who knows that international field, who knows the language of the international legislators, who knows the ins and outs, and because of your experience as head of the BVI Finance Hong Kong office and all those global fields that you have worked in, do you see that need being a critical one for this territory, especially now with what we're going through?
Indeed, I do. In fact, more than ever. I have represented the territory. In fact, I was the one who started the Hong Kong office. I set it up, and Miss Elise Donovan followed me. I also started the London office, and of course, that has been a significant success to the British Virgin Islands. I represented the British Virgin Islands. I have stood up for the British Virgin Islands internationally.
Oh yes,
You
we
would
remember that.
You would recall my discussion with Dame Margaret Hodge on the BBC.
Feisty.
Feisty you might call it, but I thought it necessary to defend the British Virgin Islands and its reputation. And I think, if I may say so, I did an excellent job. I have been on the board of BVI Finance. In fact, I should also say I was the first person to be selected by I believe it was Mr. O'Neill's administration to head what is now called BVI Finance, but what was then called the BVI International Finance Center. And so I am steeped, if you want to call it that, in financial services. But I'm not just about financial services, let me see.
Mm-hmm.
I worked as I started out by saying, with Mr. Stout. I worked as a permanent secretary. I worked in tourism. And by the way, I was a member of the board of tourism for 6 or 7 years. What were my accomplishments on the board? We certainly were the first. We didn't have the $15 or $16 million that the government now has. We had a very small budget, but we were able to make that budget do a lot for us. We, for instance, were able to do a cruise tourism study. Meade Malone and the principals, I think, of Ernst & Young in Barbados were the ones who did that cruise tourism study to determine the impact of cruise tourism on the British Virgin Islands. We went from, being a small country that attracted people from the Northeast United States and maybe California, to people who attracted people from all over the world. In fact, as you know, the BVI is one of the top 10 countries in tourism in the Caribbean. So there was tourism. I talked about education. I talked about climate. I talked about it only in terms of the hurricane. But even before that, I was very keen on the environment. In fact, one person I remember referred to me as the mother of the environment, because with people like Lewis Potter and the late Bertrand Letzam, we were able to get an award for our management of the environment. And you see that whole marine parks and protected areas. Again, I was pivotal to that happening in the British Virgin Islands when I was a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor. Today we have a number of parks. We continue to build on them. But that was funded by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and we were able to develop a number of areas on Virgin Gorda and elsewhere to protect our environment and to protect the resources of the British Virgin Islands. So I'm very proud of my experience, my competence over the years.
But you haven't mentioned your experience and competence as being the wife of a former premier. Your husband, Dr. D. Orlando Smith, has been the premier of this territory for what? It was,
He was
2 terms?
3 terms, in fact.
Three
3
terms.
terms.
And it was always said that yes, Dr. Smith is the premier, but the territory is being run by his wife, Lorna.
Kathy, nothing could be further. I'm glad you're laughing because nothing could be further from the truth. I'm proud of my husband. I'm very proud of his accomplishments. In fact, we grew up on 2 tracks professionally. Dr. Smith, the doctor, the chief medical officer, and later the politician or the political leader. I grew up as Lorna Smith. My expertise was always in international relations, I would say. So Lorna Smith, the permanent secretary, I worked to ensure with Mr. Stout again that we were members of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States and the CARICOM. In addition to all that I have done, so it was always Lorna Smith, permanent secretary, Lorna Smith, public servant. So to say that I was running, I mean, I hear it too. I
know you would have.
I hear it, but it's
far
nothing,
from the truth.
Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, I'm very proud, as I said, of my husband. He was one of the most brilliant persons, and not was, he is one of the most brilliant persons in the British Virgin Islands. He has a very fine mind, and he makes up his own mind. Of course, I might, give an opinion like you would or anybody else, and the territory would, but at the end of the day, he makes and made his own decisions.
And that's a side that many persons fail to understand when
they don't understand. Yeah.
Okay. But what, having seen him in that position as the premier of the territory, what are some of the things that you would have learned? Because definitely him being there, you being his wife, you would have seen and learned a lot. What are some of the key things that you would take out of his book?
I learned a lot from Dr. Smith, the premier. I learned to listen to as many people in the community as possible, because part of communications, in fact, probably the most important part of communications, is listening. He and I are a little different in that I am not as calm as he is.
I was going to come to that.
So let me put it on the table now. We are different in that respect, but I have learned a lot from him in terms of the importance of always being calm, listening to as many people as you can, acting on the basis of knowledge, not on the basis of feeling, on the basis of knowledge. He always went forward ensuring that not just ensuring, but he went forward on the basis of having advice and knowledge. So those things were very critical. Those things were what a few of the things I learned from him. He also knew how to delegate. Very important. You had, 5 ministers? A minister of health, a minister of education, a minister of communications, and so on. He never tried to tell. I mean, they would agree as a cabinet or as a group in principle how to move forward. But he was not somebody who would sort of, be looking over your shoulder, looking over his shoulder. He would, if there's a minister of education and this is where we're going to go, he would, and I'm just using that as an example, that minister would move forward. And the same thing with his permanent secretary, his staff. That's why they loved him so much, because he allowed them to grow. He gave them the kind of empowerment that they need. And that is what I want to do, Kathy. Moving now to myself. Empowerment is so important. Empowerment for our young people. You know, our young people, they need so much. We talk about education for our young people, but education is more than just a word. It's relevant education. It's education that involves whether they want to be a professional, you know, in terms of financial services, reach the top in that area, or whether they want to be in a trade. We need to make sure that we have the kind of education that is relevant to these young people. We need to mentor them. We need to also make sure that they have the financial resources. Once they decide, BVI, as I said elsewhere, entrepreneurship is almost part of our DNA,
Yeah.
you know. So, and one of the things that they need is mentoring, they need funding, and so on. They also need a plan. And that's where the mentoring comes in, because it helps them to clearly think about how they should be proceeding. So young people are at the core of my platform, if you want to call it that, as I move forward. And I have been talking over the years. I've been a member of the Youth Empowerment Program for many years.
I know that's your baby.
That's my baby indeed. I'm so glad something is happening on Virgin Gorda.
Awesome.
So in fact, it's not just about Road Town, which you know as a Rotarian,
Yes, yes.
that we are working towards, but there is a YEP facility. In fact, the government, thanks to them, have identified a piece of property that could be used for, that will be used for the development of the youth empowerment, a youth empowerment program facility up there. There is so much to be done with our young people. And while I talk about young people, Kathy, I also want to talk about something that I've talked about, and that's children with special needs, or people, young people with special needs. You know, as I've said before, it's touched me in a very personal way. You know, a member of my family is impacted or has those special needs. And so we have to include those people. You know, too often we see people, sometimes we see people on the street, and we sort of tend to just be dismissive of them. But we need to, at an early age, that's why child care even is so important. At an early age, we need to make sure that those young people are taken care of, and that they're included, that they are given an opportunity to grow. You take, for instance, autism. Autism is just about children and people proceeding on a track that is different. You know, they're just different people.
Yes, in some sections we call them differently abled.
Differently abled. I remember one minister used to refer to them as that, and I was so pleased to hear that. So young people is a very big part of my plans, my platform. Certainly the infrastructure that I talked about. And when I talk about infrastructure, I'm not just talking about our crumbling roads. I'm talking about sanitation. I'm talking about all those other areas, even airlift, all those things we need to be looking at in terms of infrastructure. We need to be making sure, and this is, if you want to call it, revitalization of the economy. This is another area, probably my primary area, so to speak, because everybody is included in that. Revitalizing the economy through, as I mentioned, creating, finding funding, and implementing a proper infrastructure program. It's not going to take 10 years, it's going to take a long time, but we have to get started. And then the other area is, of course, entrepreneurship. A lot of people, Kathy, talk about, or experience, not talk about, experience difficulty in, getting approvals for work permits, trade licenses, even getting an appointment to meet with a minister.
Systems.
Those systems, the red tape, it needs to be cut. And we need to find a way. Look at Singapore. It's the easiest place in the world to do business. Why can't we make it easier to do business here?
Yeah, but as the clock is coming down on us already, something has to be done so we can extend during this season.
Another time, please invite me back.
Will do. But I want us to quickly touch on two things that has been coming up since we got wind that there is a likelihood that Mrs. Smith is going to run. One, your age. And two, personality. You put it on the table earlier, the difference in personality when it comes to your husband, and you the most fireball type and the no nonsense, openly type of person. Talk to us quickly on those two areas.
Of course, I talked about the other one before, but let's talk to my age.
Yes.
I would never want to swap the inspirational experiences that I had with working directly with the likes of Mr. Stout, Mr. Romney, and all those other ministers. I worked with my husband as well. I don't want I could not exchange that for anything in the world. I'm 70 years old and I've never hidden it. I feel it's about, I feel competent. It's about your strength, and it's about your ability to perform. And I have all those. You don't get up early in the morning when we're going to the college classics, but you know how many of those 30, 40, and 50-year-olds I outrun?
I know.
Exactly. So age for me is purely a number. And as I said, I don't ever want to exchange the experiences that I had with working with inspirational persons like Mr. Stout and so on over the years. So that's not a problem for me. And the fireball part, what did you want to ask me now?
Yes.
I'm not sure about that.
Talk about your likability across board.
I have heard a comment or two about my likability. In this election, at this time, you began by asking me the question about this time, why I'm running. At this point in time, we need clarity, we need experience, and we need strength to guide the BVI into the future. We're not running a popularity contest. We can't afford it. So it is not about who is better liked. It's about who you trust and who is more competent. I consider myself to be trustworthy and to be competent. And I hope, Kathy, you will have me back at another time. It doesn't have to be a big story, but to talk.
Yeah, we will have that
talk.
And
most importantly, since I have this opportunity, I hope that the voters of the British Virgin Islands would give me that opportunity, because it is only with them, through them, that I would be able to prove that I am able to lead, or to help to lead, because it's going to be 13 people, but to help to lead this country to a place where we want to be, where we need to be. As I started out by saying, the BVI deserves the best, and that is my commitment.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your confirmation today. We've heard it directly from the horse's mouth. Mrs. Lorna G. Smith is going to be contesting the general elections this year as an at-large candidate. We'll hear more from her in days and weeks to come. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of The Big Story.
We know that where you choose to bank matters, and it is your vote on what your funds do in strengthening our community. As your official Bank of Paradise, we invest and support the lifeblood of our economy by helping in the realization of personal goals for homeownership, education, and entrepreneurial visions, which support small businesses. We make it our place to connect with persons and worthy causes, and we have been doing so for more than 30 years. Where your money goes and what your dollars empower are your choice. And we thank you for choosing us, a bank that gives where it matters the most, for you, for our community, and a happier tomorrow. The National Bank of the Virgin Islands.
Everyone looks to the future, but no one truly knows what the future holds.
The number of people under the age of 20 with type 2 diabetes could increase by 49% by 2050. Let it be known that we all have a 30% chance of developing hypertension.
Globally, more than 300 million people of all ages suffer from depression.
More than 60,000 young adults aged 20 to 39 are diagnosed with cancer each year. Obesity leads to problems such as stroke, heart disease, and kidney failure.
No matter your race, age, or color, we are all at risk.
These diseases can be managed or prevented if caught early.
But with the right medicine and the right doctors to keep us on a path to live a robust and healthy life,
we will live well.
There are many ways to enjoy life, like so many ways to count on Popular.
Plug into Digicel Plus and get even more entertainment with Disney Plus included. The best of Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, and National Geographic all in one place. Whenever you want, plug into Plus to enjoy Disney Plus and much more with a home fiber bundle. Sign up today. Digicel Plus.